The 3rd century before the Common Era. The air above the Seine feels heavy and damp, carrying the scent of mud, smoky hearths, and smoked fish. On an island that millennia later will be known as the Ile de la Cité, a settlement takes shape. This isn't a city, at least not yet. Instead, it's a tangle of muddy paths and round huts made from wood and clay, topped with straw roofs. Around 259 years before the Common Era, a Celtic tribe called the Parisii arrived here. Their name might mean the boat people. Their entire existence revolves around the river. It feeds them, shields them, and serves as their highway. Men drag dugout canoes onto the shore while women mend fishing nets. Geography shaped everything. The island itself is a natural fortress. 2 centuries later, dust rises on the horizon. These aren't merchants. They are disciplined columns of Roman legions. In 52 years before the Common Era, Julius Caesar arrives to conquer Gaul. The Parisii resist. In response, their settlement is burned to the ground. Smoke from burning straw and timber blankets the river. Where huts once stood, only blackened circles mark the earth, surrounded by cooling ash. The first birth of Paris begins with its complete destruction. A brand new world rises from scorched earth. The Romans don't just build a settlement, they create a city modeled on imperial standards, Lutetia. But instead of the island, they choose the higher, drier left bank of the Seine. Curvy paths give way to straight, stone-paved streets, crossing at perfect right angles. Huts are replaced by stone villas with intricate mosaic floors. A forum, aqueduct, triumphal arch, and public baths, known as thermae, take shape. For entertainment, they erect an amphitheater that can hold 15,000 people, enough for the entire city and surrounding area all at once. The natural chaos yields to imperial order. The city that survived the 100 Years' War, the plague, and 2 world occupations was once almost abandoned by its own people without a fight. We'll explore how Roman engineers built Lutetia from the ground up, yet failed to defend it from invading Germanic tribes. We'll witness the construction of Notre Dame and the bloodshed that stained its surroundings during the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. We'll walk along boulevards designed not just for beauty, but so cannons could be aimed at rebellious citizens. The big question: why did Paris rise stronger every time it was burned to the ground? By the 3rd century of the Common Era, the order Rome had built began to crumble. The empire's borders cracked under the pressure of Germanic tribes. Gaul was no longer safe. The thriving city of Lutetia on the left bank became a vulnerable target for raids. The inhabitants did the only thing they could. They abandoned their stone houses, the forum, and the amphitheater, retreating back to where it all began, the fortified island of the Cité. The entire Roman project shrank down to the size of its Celtic seed. The stone walls on the left bank stood empty. Civilization squeezed once again onto a small patch of land, protected only by water and desperation. Roman rule vanished, and on the island of the Seine, beneath the shadow of abandoned temples, a new era took shape, one of fear and faith intertwined. In the year 451, chilling news reached the city. Attila was coming. The Hunnic hordes swept westward, burning everything in their path. Panic gripped the residents. They packed their belongings, ready to flee. But amid the cries and despair, a calm voice rose up. A young woman named Genevieve spoke, not calling for arms, but urging her fellow citizens to stay and pray. Her faith burned brighter than the widespread terror. Then something unexplainable happened. Attila's army changed course and bypassed the city. That is how Genevieve became the holy protector of Paris. Half a century later, in the year 508, Clovis I, king of the Franks, made the city his capital, and it officially took on the name we know today. A new threat arrives not from the land, but from the water. Starting in 845, longships with dragon heads carved into their prows sail up the Seine River. These are the Vikings. Their raids turn into an annual nightmare. The Normans don't aim to conquer the city. They want its wealth. They demand ransom. One weary Paris finally pays a staggering price for peace, 7,000 pounds of silver. Yet there are moments of desperate heroism. During the siege of 885, a few hundred defenders hold fortified bridges for months against thousands of attackers, stopping them from breaking through to the island's heart. The Viking threat recedes, but its memory lingers. The answer to brute force takes shape in stone. In the year 1163, they lay the first stone at the foundation of Notre Dame Cathedral. Its construction will stretch across nearly 2 centuries. This is more than just a church. It's a bold statement. Generation after generation of stonemasons and carpenters will raise its Gothic arches and flying buttresses, never expecting to witness the finished work. This response is not to an immediate threat, but to the challenge of eternity. Meanwhile, King Philip II, who reigned from 1180 to 1223, tackles more earthly concerns. He orders the muddy, impassable streets paved, transforming them from foul-smelling ditches into proper roads. And on the western edge of the city, he builds the Louvre, not a palace, but a stern fortress with thick walls and a deep moat, designed for one purpose only, to protect the royal treasury. By the early 1300s, the city had become not just a political hub, but an intellectual powerhouse of Europe. On the left bank of the Seine, the University of Paris was born, one of the continent's earliest centers of higher learning. The neighborhood around it swelled with thousands of students from across the Christian world. The air buzzed with debates in Latin, the universal language of science and theology. That's how the district earned its name, the Latin Quarter. Knowledge pulled people in like a magnet. By the year 1300, Paris's population reached 200,000, making it one of the largest cities in Europe. Its wealth and density were its greatest strengths, and also its most serious vulnerabilities. Paris thrived, growing into the most populous city in the Christian world, but this prosperity proved fragile. The 14th century did not bring new cathedrals or grand achievements. Instead, it unleashed a wave of disasters. First came the famine of the 1310s, starving much of Europe. Then in 1337, England and France plunged into the 100 Years' War. Yet the worst was still to come. In 1348, the Black Death swept through the city. It claimed between 1/3 and 1/2 of Paris's population. Streets that once buzzed with life fell silent. The only sound was the creak of cartwheels hauling away the dead. Bodies piled up faster than they could be buried. For years, a sickly, sweet stench of decay hung heavy over the city. Trouble didn't just come from outside. In 1420, Paris fell to the English and their allies. Their occupation lasted 16 years. Foreign flags flew from the city's towers. But the humiliation at the hands of invaders was only part of the story. Despair turned inward. The country was tearing itself apart. In 1358, the peasant revolt known as the Jacquerie erupted. Then in 1382, the people of Paris, pushed to the brink by crushing taxes, rose up in the Guillotines uprising, arming themselves with war hammers straight from the town hall's arsenal. Just when all hope seemed lost, it arrived in the form of a 17-year-old peasant girl from the village of Domremy. In 1429, Joan of Arc took command of the French army, declaring that God had sent her. Her faith and charisma sparked a fire in the soldiers and shifted the course of the war. That fall, she led the troops in an assault on Paris. But the attempt to free the capital ended in failure. Joan was wounded at the Saint-Honoré Gate, and the army was forced to retreat. Her mission in Paris fell short. Yet the flame she ignited could no longer be extinguished. Joan's own fate was tragic. 2 years later, in 1431, she was burned at the stake at just 19 years old. Still, her sacrifice was not in vain. Paris was finally liberated in 1436. The city stood free but ravaged. The walls survived, but every other house stood empty. After the devastation of the 100 Years' War and the plague, a new century dawns in Paris, carrying the fresh breath of the Italian Renaissance. King Francis I returns from his campaigns with a bold vision. His capital must shine. He invites Leonardo da Vinci to his court and launches an ambitious transformation. The gloomy medieval fortress of the Louvre, with its thick walls and narrow arrow slits, is torn down. In its place, skilled masons raise an elegant palace, featuring large windows, graceful columns, and sculpted friezes. Lutes fill the halls with music. Courtiers debate sonnets and ancient statues. It feels as though the era of brute force has given way to art and reason. Beneath the glitter of a new era, a darker force brews: religious hatred. On August 24th, 1572, the gentle strumming of lutes gives way to the tolling of alarm bells. The St. Bartholomew's Day massacre begins. Streets surrounding the new palace turn into scenes of slaughter. Catholic mobs, driven by the nobility, drag Protestant Huguenots from their homes and kill them right on the cobblestones. The wounded neighbors cry, the axe pounding on doors, the scent of blood and gunpowder mingle thick in the air. This elegant city of art plunges into primordial terror for days. In Paris alone, thousands perish within this brief nightmare. Across France, waves of violence sweep through, claiming up to 70,000 lives. The Seine, the city's eternal lifeline, becomes its grave. Bodies are thrown from bridges. The river that once carried life now carries southward the bloated corpses of men, women, and children, turning the water murky and red. Decades of religious wars had drained the country to its limits. Finally, a king tired of bloodshed took the throne. Henry IV, once a Protestant himself, realized he couldn't conquer Catholic Paris by force. To end the slaughter and unite France, he converted to Catholicism. His famous words, "Paris is well worth a mass," weren't cynical. They marked the price paid for peace, and he began to build that peace in stone. Henry IV commissioned the Pont Neuf, the new bridge. It was Paris's first bridge without houses, wide and open, designed for people, not just defense. It connected a fractured city and became a symbol of a new, pragmatic era born from ashes and blood. After the peace established by Henry IV, an era of absolute power begins. Paris transforms into a stage for royal might. Louis XIV, the Sun King, builds the magnificent House of Invalids, its golden dome gleaming as a sanctuary for veterans of countless wars. He carves wide, straight boulevards, slicing through the chaos of medieval streets like a ruler. Power seeps even into language. In 1635, Cardinal Richelieu founds the French Academy to regulate and standardize the nation's speech. But by 1682, the king who built this dazzling facade turns his back on the city. Distrusting the rebellious Parisians, Louis XIV moves the entire royal court to Versailles, leaving the capital to fend for itself. The king left, but the city did not die. Instead, in the power vacuum, it found its own pulse. In the 18th century, Paris became the heart of the Enlightenment. In elegant salons, bathed in candlelight and scented with powder, and in bustling coffeehouses where cups clattered and the air filled with the aroma of roasted beans, a new world was born. Philosophers like Voltaire, Rousseau, and Diderot debated ideas that would soon shake the foundations of thrones across Europe: human rights, freedom, and reason. The king ruled from Versailles, but the power of ideas now belonged entirely to Paris. But beneath the gleaming salons lies a harsher reality. The city's population had swelled past 600,000. In narrow, shadowy alleys, the poor squeezed into appalling overcrowding and filth. A noble's carriage splashes mud onto a vegetable cellar hawking produce straight from the dirt. Yet the most alarming sign of collapse was the smell. By the 1780s, cemeteries in the city center, like the Cemetery of the Innocents, overflowed so much that the ground rose nearly 7 feet above street level. On hot days, a sickly sweet stench of decay spread through nearby neighborhoods, seeping into homes, mingling with the scent of cooking. Paris was literally choking on its dead. The solution to this problem turned out to be as radical as it was grim. Authorities launched an operation to clear the city's cemeteries, but what could they do with the remains of millions of people? The answer lay underground. Under the cover of night, to avoid shocking the residents, creaking carts draped in black cloth hauled bones and skulls to abandoned quarries, the very same ones where stone had been mined for the city's construction for centuries. This is how the catacombs were born. Workers didn't just dump the bones into piles, they crafted an underground necropolis, endless tunnels lined meticulously with thigh bones and skulls belonging to 6 million former Parisians. Horror turned into order. Decay became architecture. Above ground, the ideals of human freedom echoed. Below, beneath the feet of thinkers, lay the world's largest silent reminder that death makes us all equal. Ideas of freedom born in the quiet of drawing rooms explode onto the streets with a deafening roar. On July 14, 1789, a crowd smelling of sweat and gunpowder storms the Bastille. This grim royal fortress stands as a symbol of everything Parisians despise. Blow after blow, stone by stone, they tear it down, sparking the French Revolution. Anger gives way to an eerie silence in the Place de la Concorde. There, amidst thousands of silent onlookers, rises a new instrument of justice: the guillotine. In January 1793, King Louis XVI ascends the scaffold, and 9 months later his wife, Queen Marie Antoinette, follows. The blade that severed the monarchy's head didn't stop there. The Reign of Terror began under the leadership of Maximilien Robespierre. The guillotine ran non-stop, sending tens of thousands to their deaths. Nobles, priests, and soon enough, even revolutionaries deemed not radical enough. The streets soaked up blood, and snitching became a citizen's highest duty. But the revolution, like a crazed beast, devoured its own creators. In 1794, Robespierre himself, the incorruptible, was dragged to that very same scaffold. The terror ended not with the triumph of ideals, but with a collective exhaustion from death. Out of this bloody chaos rises order, embodied in a single man. In 1799, General Napoleon Bonaparte seizes power. He sets his sights on transforming a battered Paris into the capital of his new empire, a modern-day Rome. In 1806, he orders the construction of the Arc de Triomphe to immortalize the glory of his armies. Stonemasons begin raising massive pillars. Napoleon carves out Rue de Rivoli, a straight, arrow-like street, and overhauls the entire legal system with a code that still bears his name. He turns the Louvre, once a royal palace, into a public museum, filling its halls with masterpieces brought back from conquered lands: Italy, Egypt, and Germany. The massive Arc de Triomphe still stands unfinished. Its arches gape wide, waiting for victorious legions to march through. But instead, in 1814, after Napoleon's devastating defeats, different columns pass beneath those incomplete arches. Russian, Prussian, and Austrian troops march down the Champs-Élysées. The empire has fallen. The cobblestones meant for grand parades lie once again as ordinary stones, perfect ground for anyone ready to fight another battle. After the empire collapsed and the humiliating occupation ended, 19th century Paris became a city gripped by constant uprisings. Cobblestones, once meant for parades, transformed back into weapons. In the narrow medieval alleys, a unique form of protest took shape. This wasn't just rebellion, it was a collective act of creation. At the sound of alarm bells, people dragged everything out of their homes. Oak dressers, beds, even pianos. Men pried heavy stones loose from the streets with crowbars. Within hours, the street turned into a fortress made of household comfort and city stone. This was how the revolutions of 1830 and 1848 unfolded. The city's stubborn defiance became unbearable for the new regime. In 1853, Emperor Napoleon III hired Baron Haussmann to carry out the most radical transformation in Paris's history. The official goal was modernization. They tore down old neighborhoods, dark, overcrowded, and decaying, to flood the city with light, air, and a modern sewer system. But there was a second, unspoken purpose. In place of those demolished winding alleys, Haussmann laid out wide, straight boulevards. These avenues weren't just beautiful. They were perfect channels for artillery fire and rapid troop movement. Barricading them was nearly impossible. That's how the elegant Paris we know today was born. Not just designed for leisurely strolls, but also for control and suppression. The city's new layout seemed to have put an end to uprisings forever. But in 1871, after a crushing defeat in the war against Prussia, Paris ignited its last great rebellion. In March, the citizens formed the Paris Commune, a revolutionary government that lasted just 2 months. In response, the National Army launched an assault on its own capital. What followed was the Bloody Week. In May of 1871, government troops marched into the city. Haussmann's wide boulevards served their purpose perfectly. Artillery tore down the Communards' barricades from great distances. Over 7 days of intense fighting and mass executions, on the streets and by cemetery walls, between 10 and 20,000 people lost their lives. The era of Parisian barricades had come to an end. After the brutal massacre on its own boulevards, Paris begins to heal and steps into an era of unprecedented optimism. The golden age of culture dawns, known as the Belle Époque. The air fills with the scent of coal, perfume, and a steadfast belief in progress. That belief takes shape in steel. In 1889, ahead of the World's Fair, a skeleton of puddled iron starts rising into the city's sky. Workers balance at dizzying heights, connecting thousands of beams with a deafening roar of rivets. Parisians hated at first, calling the Eiffel Tower a metal monster. Then in 1900, the city goes underground. The Paris Metro opens, a new circulatory system for the capital. Its famous entrances emerge on the surface, elegant and flowing in Art Nouveau style, like exotic plants forged from cast iron and glass. This celebration of life is shattered by the roar of artillery. In 1914, German troops advanced so close to the capital that the city can hear the guns. To rush reinforcements to the front, they commandeer every taxi in Paris. A convoy of 600 cars carrying soldiers to the First Battle of the Marne enters history as the Taxis of the Marne. The war ends and the city throws itself back into life with renewed energy. The 20s, known as the Roaring Twenties, turn Paris into the cultural capital of the world. Writers of the Lost Generation flock to its cafes. Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald. At the same time, Coco Chanel ignites a revolution in fashion. Women in her salon shed their suffocating corsets and try on the little black dress for the first time. The air fills with the scent of her new perfume, Chanel No. 5. The scent of freedom, sweet with perfume, fades into the sharp smell of gun oil. On June 14, 1940, German soldiers marched through the streets of Paris. The city declared itself an open city to avoid destruction, but that safety came at the price of humiliation. This marked the darkest chapter in its history. Then, in July 1942, under orders from the occupiers, the French police carry out the Vel d'Hiv roundup. More than 13,000 Jewish men, women, and children from Paris are arrested and forced into a winter cycling stadium. Most of them would never return from the concentration camps. But in August 1944, as the Allies were closing in, the city erupted in rebellion. Barricades sprang up on the streets, just like in the old days. At that moment, German Commandant Dietrich von Choltitz received a direct order from Hitler: turn Paris into a field of ruins. Blow up the bridges. Burn the Louvre and Notre Dame. From his room at the Meurice Hotel, the general made a decision that would change history. He refused to follow the order. On August 25, 1944, Paris was freed. For the first time in 4 years, the city rang out with the chimes of every church bell. General Charles de Gaulle marched triumphantly down the Champs-Élysées, cheered on by the jubilant crowd. The city was saved. Its stones and bridges remained untouched. But within the celebrating throng, empty spaces yawned where 13,000 neighbors should have stood. The Louvre courtyard today is a world of light and glass. But step underground, beneath the gleaming pyramid built in 1989, and time slips back 8 centuries. Here, in cool silence, rests the massive, rough foundations of a medieval fortress that King Francis I tore down. 2 worlds, separated by centuries, coexist in the same space, one stacked above the other. This is how all of modern Paris is built. Beneath the square in front of Notre Dame lie the remnants of Roman Lutetia. Far below the streets, in old quarry tunnels, lie the bones of 6 million Parisians, transformed from an 18th century public health necessity into a haunting tourist attraction. After liberation, the city searched for new meaning through cigarette smoke and debates about freedom. In the cafes of Saint-Germain-des-Prés, philosophers Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir became the voices of existentialism, trying to make sense of a world shattered by disaster. But the city was changing physically too. In the 1950s and 60s, towering suburbs known as banlieues sprang up around the capital, encircled by the ring road called the Périphérique. This move provided millions with new homes, but it also planted a ticking time bomb, a future divide between the wealthy city center and the struggling outskirts. This rupture exploded in May 1968. Paris ground to a halt. Student protests in the Latin Quarter escalated into a general strike, and cobblestones from the old Ottoman-era streets rained down on the police once again. The city challenged authority, not just on the barricades. Then, in 1977, the Pompidou Center opened, a radical building turned inside out with its pipes and ducts exposed for the world to see, shocking traditionalists. In the 1980s, President François Mitterrand launched the Grand Projects, gifting the city not only the glass pyramid at the Louvre, but also the Bastille Opera House and the futuristic Grande Arche in La Défense. The cycle of upheaval didn't end. In 2005, mass riots erupted in the suburbs. Then, in 2015, the city became a target for terrorists. First, the attack on the Charlie Hebdo editorial office in January, which claimed 12 lives, followed by coordinated strikes in November that killed 130. But the most striking trial came in April of 2019. Millions around the world watched live as flames engulfed Notre Dame Cathedral. The collapse of the spire felt like an irreversible final loss. Yet, the fire became another scar, just the latest one, in a long history of wounds and rebirths. Today, the cathedral stands surrounded by scaffolding, and the promise to restore it serves as a symbol of Paris's resilience itself. Hosting the Summer Olympic Games in 2024 puts Paris back on the world stage, once again proving its timeless ability to reinvent itself. All those stones, bridges, and cathedrals that have stood for centuries owe their survival largely to one decision made in a hotel room in 1944. The choice of a single general to disobey an order. That moment shrinks the gap between past and present to a single human act. Paris isn't a museum frozen in stone. It's a living city that remembers everything but never stops rebuilding itself. Its story goes on,